In this video, we are going to be identifying the key features of linear functions. The key features are slope and y-intercept. Slope is the same thing as rate of change. Y-intercept is the point where your line crosses the y-axis. So from tables, which is what we're going to start with, we're going to use tables and then graphs. So with tables, the slope is just the rate of change. So we have a table already, and we're just going to find the change in y over change in x. So for example 1, the change in y over the change in x, there's a couple different things that we could do. We could pick 2 points and subtract the y values, so that would be 9 minus 5, and subtract the x values, which would be 3 minus 1, so that would give us 4 over 2, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So we can use the rate of change to find that our slope is 2. Another way that we could find the rate of change is by just counting. Since this is a linear function, we could see what is our change in y by seeing how are our y values increasing. From 5 to 7, that's going up by 2. And from 1 to 2, that's going up by 1. 2 to 3 is going up by 1. So either way that we choose, we're going to get a slope or a rate of change of 2 over 1, which is just 2. All right, now if we want to find the y-intercept. The y-intercept from a table is always the point where x is 0. Well, in this table, we don't have x is 0. We have x is 1, x is 2, and x is 3. So we're going to have to work backwards using the slope to find the y-intercept. So if x is 0, what would that y value be? Well, if we use the rate of change, remember we saw that that was increasing by 2 each time. So what would that number have to be before 5? If I have a number and then I add 2 and I get 5, what number would that be? Well, that would be 3, because 3 plus 2 gives me 5. So this is how we would find the y-intercept in the table if it wasn't already given to us. So our y-intercept is the point 0, 3. Let's do another example. In example 2, we want to find the slope. That's your change in y over change in x. Well, we could count and see how many this is changing by on y's, how many it's changing by x. Or we could just pick 2 points. It doesn't matter which 2 you pick. I'm going to pick the second point and the fourth point. So we need to subtract our y's. 1 minus 7 and 2 minus 0. All right, so 1 minus 7 is negative 6. 2 minus 0 is 2. And negative 6 over 2, or negative 6 divided by 2, is negative 3. So the slope here, or the rate of change, is negative 3. Now to find our y-intercept. Remember, the y-intercept is wherever x is 0. The point where x is 0 is right here at 0, 7. So the y-intercept is the point 0, 7. In example 3, to find the slope, the change in y over the change in x, we can pick any 2 points. So I could pick the last 2 points. Subtract the y's, so 5 minus 6. Subtract the x's, 6 minus 4. So 5 minus 6 is negative 1. 6 minus 4 is 2. So our slope is just negative 1/2. I can't simplify that anymore. Now to find our y-intercept. We're looking for the point where x is 0. X is 0 right here. So that point, 0, 8, is our y-intercept. Now we're going to look at finding key features of linear functions, so finding the slope and the y-intercept from graphs. It's really the same process with just one more step added. The only difference here is that since we have a graph, we're going to create our own table from 2 perfect points. So to find the slope from example 1, we need to make a table using 2 perfect points. So I can see from this graph, there's a perfect point here, there's a perfect point here, here, and so on. I could pick any of those perfect points. It doesn't matter which 2 I pick, but I could make a table with several of them if I wanted to. Okay, so using this point here, the y-intercept is actually 0, 3. Then we have the point 1, 5. Then we have the point 2, 7. And the point 3, 9. So I'm just going to make a table with those values. Really, you only need 2 of those values. So I could pick any 2 of those that I want to. Okay, I'm just going to pick this point and this point. So my change in y over change in x is going to be 5 minus 3 over 1 minus 0. 5 minus 3 is 2, 1 minus 0 is 1, so that's just a slope or a rate of change of 2. Now another way to find slope is rise over run. So rise over run is using 2 points from the graph and counting up or down and left or right. So if I pick any 2 points from this graph, let's say I start at 0, 3 and I go up 2, right 1. That's my rise over run. So I went up 2, right 1. So that gives me a positive 2 because I went up and a positive 1 because I went to the right. I would say stick with the tables because rate of change is something that you won't easily forget. Rise over run can be a bit tricky sometimes. All right, now let's talk about the y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept from a graph is the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So this line crosses the y-axis. Remember, this is our y-axis. This is the x-axis. So this line crosses the y-axis at 0, 3. Let's do some more examples. In example 2, the slope, we're going to find that by creating a table of perfect points. So we can pick any 2 perfect points on this line. So I see a point here and I see a point here. Right, so those points are 1, 4 and 2, 1. So to find our change in y over change in x, that would be 1 minus 4, 2 minus 1. Okay, so I subtracted my y's, subtracted my x's. So that's negative 3 over 1, which is just negative 3. Now I could also use the rise over run method. So to do that, I would start at one point, it doesn't matter which one, and just count to get to the next one. So if I start at 1, 4, I would go down 3, right 1. So since I went down 3 and right 1, that's a negative 3 since I went down, and a positive 1 since I went to the right. So negative 3 over 1 is still negative 3, no matter which way you choose to do that. All right, now let's look at the y-intercept. Again, the y-intercept is wherever our line crosses the y-axis. So that would be here at this point. All right, just so I can see more precisely, I'm going to remove that. So that is this point right here, and that is at 0, 7. So our y-intercept is 0, 7. And finally, example 3. To find the slope, we need to pick 2 perfect points. So I'm going to pick this point and this point. So the first point is 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the second point is 4, 6. So in my table, I have the 0.27 and the 0.46. And I'm going to find the slope, or the change in y, over change in x of those 2 points. So 6 minus 7 over 4 minus 2. So that would be -1 over +2, so -1/2. Now, if I wanted to use the rise over run method, I would simply pick one point and go from that point to the other. So I would go down 1, right 2. So since I went down 1 and right 2, that's where the -1 comes from, because I went down, and the +2 comes because I went to the right. Now to find the y-intercept. The y-intercept on this graph is wherever that red line crosses over the y-axis. So we can see that they cross right here at this point. And that point is 0, 8.